Hey guys, it's Daniel. The following is a quote from Dave Grohl where he discusses why and how Nirvana got out of their contract with Sub Pop, their first label. This quote is from an interview Dave Grohl did with a Dutch magazine called OOR in November of 1991. Later in this video, by the way, I'm going to show you a clip from my interview with Sub Pop co-founder Bruce Pavitt where he discusses how Nirvana saved the label from bankruptcy. It ties in a bit with what Dave Grohl is talking about here. Quote, "We were still under contract to Sub Pop and had to pay ourselves out of that contract, a large sum of money, and rightfully so. They're just normal people who live in Seattle, not cunning businessmen, but normal people who love music. We're still good friends. The one thing that can really disturb a relationship is business. We don't like to consider any of this business, even though obviously it is. We sell records and make money, and that's a business, but nobody considers it a job. And we don't do it for the money, we don't do it for the business." Sub Pop was full of normal music-loving people who at one point had to sell so many records that they went completely berserk. It just got crazy and they started losing money and throwing money away. They ended up in debt. The label almost collapsed and disappeared. Now they're way back on the right track, but at the time it was near bankruptcy. We tried to get out of it by negotiating with larger record companies. There were 8 major labels that were interested and they offered us incredible amounts, ranging from $500,000 to $1 million. Instead, we deliberately chose Geffen, who offered us less money but were willing to give us total artistic freedom. As far as the music and lyrics of Nirvana, we want to take the decisions ourselves. People on our current label, Geffen, understand that. We signed to DGC because they were the record label with employees who knew where Nirvana was coming from. For instance, Geffen already had Sonic Youth. They know the underground and respect the whims of the subculture. I mean, we signed for a small amount of money and all of that was budgeted towards recording and video, and the money we had to give the Sub Pop. Some people are under the impression that we signed to a major label for the money, when in reality, we didn't get any money." End quote. Now here's the clip from my interview with Sub Pop co-founder Bruce Pavitt. If you want to see the full interview, it's linked below. Was there ever any point in time in Sub Pop's history where you felt like, you know what, things just aren't working out, let's pack it in? Did you ever get to that kind of a point?
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is I was just going through the timeline the other day, and I would say late August of 91, John and I were about the only ones left in the office. We had laid off the staff, and we went to a convention that my friend Calvin put together in Olympia called the International Pop Underground Convention. Fugazi was there, L7 was there, all sorts of bands were there. We went down there, and a photographer came up to me and said, "That check you gave me last week for $100, that bounced." And I'm a little upset about that. I'm like, oh man, I'm so sorry. So I went to my bank account and drained my personal account and gave him my last $100 because our company didn't even have $100, okay? And you got to realize this is late August. So a few days after that, what happens, DGC is shipping Smells Like Teen Spirit to radio. A week later, it starts blowing up. A month later, the record's selling. 4 months later, we do the math and we're due at least $500,000 from Geffen. A month later, we're like, oh, we're actually due $1 million from Geffen. So this, just at that moment where you're like, we literally cannot come up with $100. This is the scene in the movie where we're supposed to just pack it in, and we almost did. But it turned around miraculously, so I think that's an epic timeline.
That's amazing. So how did it feel, knowing that the company was about to go into the ground and then all of a sudden Teen Spirit blows up and basically saves the company?
That felt incredible. As soon as it came out, I was getting phone calls from all over the country. A friend of mine in Chicago was saying, I just heard that song blasting out of a taxi cab that just drove past my window. There was a nightclub in Seattle called The Vogue, which was a dance club. And a DJ called me up and he said, you know what? I never play rock, but last night I thought I'm going to try Smells Like Teen Spirit. And it was the hit of the night. So I'm like, it's getting played in taxi cabs. It's getting played in dance clubs. Boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, it's on MTV and it was beyond, beyond. It was an incredible rush. And then when you saw them go into regular rotation on MTV, game over,
When you first heard Smells Like Teen Spirit, did you think it was something special?
Absolutely. Although I had some criticisms of their earlier work, I remember John and we were down at this Seattle nightclub, and a representative from DGC, this is probably August of 91, said she had a tape of the album, and we went outside and we went in her car, we threw it on, we heard it from front to back, and every second of that record was blowing our minds. We instinctively knew that it was going to be huge, and especially Smells Like Teen Spirit. As soon as we heard it, we're like speechless. Knew it was just knew it was going to not. It would. They were knocking it out of the park, and to see that confirmation was that was so exciting that I just knew that there was never going to be another moment in my life in the music business that was going to rival that.
Really?
Absolutely. And I remember I exited the biz a couple decades ago to raise some kids and kind of do something else. But I knew that, like, there's no way that I'm ever going to experience that level of excitement again. I did it. I can park that.
Really? What specifically made you feel that strongly about that?
Well, just, to put things in perspective, I had been an indie music activist for a decade at that point. The whole point of the Sub Pop zine and radio show, et cetera, was to promote these regional bands that would typically press like 1,000 singles. If they sold 5,000 albums, that was a really big deal. 15,000 was knocking it out of the park. So that was the culture during the 80s. Things started to ramp up a little. Sales were getting a little better. But I had seen years and years of small regional bands barely eking out a living. And to see Nirvana, who had gone from 1,000 copies of their, Love Buzz single to selling 400,000 records a week by January of 92 was such an extreme turnaround that it was literally mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, even when it comes to Bleach, that record sold 40,000 copies initially, which that in itself is, still pretty good.
That was good numbers. At that time, that was considered a really successful record. If you could sell 40,000, 50,000 indie records, that was pretty darn good. Now, I also want to mention, just for some context, is that right as Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, Sub Pop simultaneously released an album by Mudhoney, who released an album called Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge, and that wound up selling 100,000 records, which, those are great numbers, and that record really helped us out as well, but it was dwarfed by the millions and millions of sales of Nevermind. But yeah. I want to give Mudhoney their due because they actually had a hit record there.